Welcome to C-Level Leadership. I'm Darren Mel. I'm not a CEO, and that's the point. These conversations are about leading from the middle, where trust, empathy, and real work actually happen. Thanks for listening. Hi, welcome back to another episode of C-Level Leadership, and I'm your host, Darren Mel, average human being and people leader for over 20 years. And that's what it's all about, people. And this episode we're going to talk about, for any of you that knows me, and if you get to know me through this podcast, you're going to know that music is everything to me. Write about it constantly. There's always songs playing in my head. So Don't Believe the Hype, great song by Flavor Flav and Public Enemy. And about culture, a question for all of you leaders out there. Have you ever joined a company that promised a great culture and then felt within 2 weeks that something was off? And what I wanted to talk about with culture is I feel the culture it's felt and not announced. It really isn't something you can tell somebody that you have a great culture. It really, if you're talking about culture, doesn't it really come back to you experiencing it? And I think that Public Enemy nailed it with that song back in the 80s of Don't Believe the Hype. They weren't talking about company culture, but if the song was out in today's corporate, we'll call it the LinkedIn economy, I'm convinced that the song would be required listening, probably for every interview panel on the earth. So let's talk about culture just for a few minutes here today. I've been working for a very long time, and if I had a dollar for every time I heard, we have an incredible culture here, I'd be retired already and living somewhere and not interviewing and hiring salespeople. I'd be sipping something of my choice and probably wearing flip-flops for year round and muting any LinkedIn notifications for sport. But here's my just overview what I've seen, from years of it. The moment, like I said, like you have to tell people you have a great culture, you probably don't. Great cultures don't announce themselves, and they don't need hashtags, billboards, or some type of inspirational wall art featuring mountain climbers or the cat saying "hang in there" or the word family. They don't need a slide or a deck or a carefully rehearsed answer in the window. They just show up. Culture doesn't live, in my opinion, in job descriptions. It doesn't live in career pages, mission statements, or onboarding videos with suspiciously happy actors pretending to be employees. Culture lives in behavior, and it lives in how people talk about their manager when their manager is in the room, which comes back to when we were talking about brand and your brand as a leader. It also lives in whether people feel safe in asking dumb questions without being quietly judged. It lives in whether top performers stick around even when recruiters come knocking with a shinier comp plan and better titles. And yet in interviews, I still hear culture explained like it's a feature on the back of a cereal box. Like things like, we collaborate, we support each other, we win as a team. Cool, says just about everyone. That's, in my opinion, that's not culture. That's just a corporate speak. Real culture shows itself in the uncomfortable moments and how mistakes are handled, and whether people feel protected when they speak up, and whether leaders disappear when things get hard, or do they lean in closer. Culture isn't how things look when the quarter is good. It's how people behave when the numbers aren't. Over the years, and we'll definitely dig in and interviewing. We'll probably do quite a few episodes on that. But real culture, I think, I've tried to stop selling candidates on the culture altogether. What I've tried to do through my interview process is bring the culture to them and let them decide if it's where they want to be. And I think that's a really key point. What I try to do and we'll get more into this in interviews and other casts, but if I've got somebody that's coming in, say, for their final interview, I bring in a panel of anywhere from 2 to 5 people on the team already that are doing the job that this person is interviewing for, and coming down to the final interview saying that they most likely this is what they want. That panel interview, what I do with them is the current employees that come on the call, they don't ask any questions of the candidate. They're simply there to answer the questions of the candidate. And I say, ask them anything you want, because it's your decision to decide if you can see yourself here and does it fit the culture that you're looking for. And why do I do that? Because it's not my job to convince someone whether we have a great culture or not. It's their job to feel it. And when candidates come to that conclusion on their own, from what I've seen, something interesting happens. They join with clearer eyes, they onboard faster, they stay longer. They don't feel sold to, they feel aligned. And in my opinion, alignment beats enthusiasm every single time. The best leaders that I've worked with all had this in common. They didn't posture. They didn't oversell. They didn't confuse vibes with values. They let consistency do the talking. Culture wasn't a slide in a deck. It was visible in retention, trust, and how people acted when things got hard. And here's where I think we need as leaders to get very real, especially if you're a leader listening to this. It is absolutely possible to have a great culture on your team while the rest of the company's culture is, let's call it, a work in progress. You may not control the entire organization. You may not control leadership, 2 or 3 levels above you. And you also may not control policies that make no sense or decisions that feel disconnected from reality. But you do control how you show up as a leader. You control how the team is treated. You control whether your people feel safe, respected, or supported. In my world of at C-level leadership, it isn't about fixing everything. It's about controlling what you can control. And sometimes that means creating a pocket of sanity in the middle of organized chaos. Your team doesn't need you to save the company. They need you to protect the culture where they live. And here's another uncomfortable truth. Leaders are often the last to know when the culture is bad, not because they're evil or incompetent, but from my lens, it's because culture has a way of going quiet around power. People stop telling you the truth. They smile in meetings and then they vent in the parking lot. That's why leadership, one of the most important traits that I believe is self-awareness, and why it matters so much. If you have to keep reminding yourself that your culture is great, it's probably a time to listen harder. If your culture is real, you don't need to market it. Your people already are. They're doing it in how long they stay, how they refer others, how they talk about work when they don't think leadership is listening. One of the things that I do for a new hire is 90 days in, the first question I ask them is, how is the job 90 days in versus what we talked about during the interview process? Is it worse, better, the same, or better? And the majority of the time I hear it's better than that, because they got a chance to feel it themselves. And if you have a great culture on your team, it's going to come out in your panels and your interviews and your interactions as your new hires interact with your current team. So how do you know when you're in a great culture? You feel it early. You feel it in interviews. You feel it in how questions are answered. And you feel it in how honest people are willing to be with you. And if you're a leader and you're brave enough to ask yourself whether your culture is actually good or just well branded, you're already doing better than most. Don't believe the hype, believe the behavior, because that is where culture lives. In closing out this episode on company culture, a couple questions for you. When have you, as a leader or an employee, felt culture immediately, good or bad. What was it that gave it away? When it was good, what was it? When it was bad, what was it? As leaders, we need to remember our roots as well, because we have to be aware of those things, like it or not. And then secondly, if someone shadowed your team for 1 week, what would they say your culture actually is? And if you don't know the answer to that question, maybe it's time that you found out. And I'll close with this. Thank you, Public Enemy. Don't believe the hype. Believe the behavior, because that is where culture lives, my friends. Thank you, leaders, for listening. And we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for your time and thanks for listening. My name's Darren Mel, average human being. Have a good one. This has been C-Level Leadership with Darren Mel, average human being. Thanks for listening.